My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I never thought the City of Love would become the place where my heart broke twice, once as a woman, and once as a grandmother. I used to dream of visiting Paris with my late husband, George. We had promised each other that someday we'd stand under the Eiffel Tower together, holding hands like we did in our youth. But life, as it often does, had other plans. George passed away 5 years ago, and Paris became a dream folded away between the pages of our old travel magazines. Then one morning my grandson Nathaniel, Nate, called. His voice was cheerful, filled with that fast-talking confidence only youth can afford. "Grandma," he said, "how would you like an all-expenses-paid trip to Paris?" At first I thought he was joking. Nate was always the charming one, the one who could talk his way out of anything. "Paris?" I laughed. "Are you sure you meant to call me and not one of your girlfriends?" He chuckled. "No, Grandma. You deserve a break. I'm going for a business conference, and there's a luxury resort with your name on it. Think of it as a vacation for both of us." I didn't know then that this invitation would change everything. I was hesitant, a 74-year-old widow traveling across the ocean. But Nate was persuasive. He told me he'd take care of everything. "You just need to pack your favorite dress and bring your smile," he said. And so, a week later, I found myself landing in Paris, my heart fluttering like a schoolgirl's. The air smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. From the airport window, I could see the city lights shimmering, a painting come to life. The luxury resort Nate booked was called Le Chateau Lumière, a grand hotel that looked like something out of a fairy tale. The marble floors reflected chandeliers, and the scent of lavender floated in the air. The receptionist, a woman named Clara Devereux, greeted us with a smile that was both elegant and knowing. "Bienvenue, Madame Whitmore," she said in her lilting accent. "We hope Paris will steal your heart," gently. I smiled, not realizing her words were more prophetic than poetic. Nate, of course, was glued to his phone, half listening to everything. "Grandma, I've got some meetings tonight, but I'll make it up to you tomorrow. Maybe we can go on that river cruise you love so much, huh?" I nodded, though a tiny ache of disappointment stirred inside me. "You go, darling." "I'll be fine," I said, patting his hand. He kissed my cheek absently and rushed off, leaving me standing in the gilded lobby, clutching my purse like a lifeline. That night, I dined alone at the resort's restaurant. The waiter, Julian Morrow, noticed my hesitation with the menu and said kindly, "May I recommend the Coq au vin, madam? It tastes better when shared, but tonight, you can pretend you're dining with an old Parisian friend." His charm made me laugh, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in too long. After dinner, I walked through the gardens, past fountains that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Paris was everything I'd imagined, yet, without someone to share it with, every beautiful sight felt slightly hollow. The next morning, Nate was gone before breakfast. A note on the desk read, "Running late for meetings, back tonight. Don't wander too far, Grandma. Paris can be tricky for tourists." By evening, he still hadn't returned. I called, texted, even asked Clara if she'd seen him. Nothing. My heart began to tighten, that familiar, motherly panic I hadn't felt since he was a boy. It wasn't until the following afternoon that Clara quietly slipped an envelope across the front desk. "This was left for you, madam," she whispered. The envelope had Nate's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Grandma, I had to leave Paris earlier than planned. Something urgent came up back home. The hotel is paid for another 2 days. I'll call when I can. Love, Nate." My mind spun. Leave me? Alone? In a foreign city, where I barely spoke the language? I went to the concierge desk, asking about flights home, but the young man said my ticket had been booked under Nate's account. He couldn't change it without his confirmation. My heart sank deeper. The next 2 days passed in a fog. I wandered the resort's corridors, trying to make sense of it. Why would he leave like that? Was he in trouble? Was I a burden? On the third morning, the truth hit harder than the Paris rain. When I went to check out, Clara looked uncomfortable. "Madam, I'm so sorry, but there seems to be an issue with your stay." "Issue?" I asked. "Yes, the remaining balance. Only the first 2 nights were paid for. The rest, she hesitated, have not been covered. It felt like the floor had fallen beneath me. What do you mean? I whispered. My grandson arranged everything. Clara's eyes softened. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding, but I'm afraid the hotel must request payment before checkout. I didn't have the heart to tell her I only carried a few €100, money meant for souvenirs, not survival. I tried calling Nate again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. For the first time in years, I felt small, forgotten. That evening, Julian, the waiter, saw me sitting alone in the lobby, clutching my suitcase. You look tired, madam. Are you waiting for someone? I tried to smile. My grandson. But I think he's not coming back. Julian's face tightened, but he said nothing. He simply offered me a cup of tea. Paris is full of surprises, he said softly. Sometimes the people we least expect end up saving us. His words lingered like a warm light in a dark tunnel. The next morning, I packed my things, ready to leave, though I had no idea where to go. As I waited in the lobby, Madame Lefebvre, the elderly woman who managed the resort's boutique, approached me. She had kind, piercing eyes that saw more than most. You have the look of a woman who trusted too much, she said in French-accented English. I've seen that look before. I wanted to tell her everything, about my husband, my family, the loneliness that sometimes followed me like a shadow. Instead, I simply said, he's my grandson. I raised him after his parents died. I thought I'd taught him better. Madame Lefebvre placed a gentle hand on mine. Children learn more from what they see than what they're told. But sometimes, it takes the world breaking their heart for them to remember yours. I didn't understand her words fully then, but I would. As I prepared to leave, the concierge informed me that someone had covered one additional night at the resort, anonymously. My name was still on the booking, but no clue as to who had paid. I looked around the lobby. Julian smiled faintly from across the room, polishing glasses. Clara nodded politely. And through the tall glass doors, the rain began to fall again, tapping softly like a ticking clock. I sat back down, unsure of what to do. Somewhere, deep down, I felt Paris wasn't done with me yet. And I wasn't done with it either. Because that night, as I watched the Eiffel Tower sparkle from my balcony, a call came through the hotel phone. A woman's voice, trembling, urgent, and unfamiliar. Madam Whitmore, she asked. This is Lucille Moreau. We need to talk. It's about your grandson. The line went dead before I could respond. And that's when I knew this trip wasn't about Paris at all. It was about discovering something far more dangerous, the truth. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved deeply, you know how silence can hurt more than words. Don't miss the next upcoming twist, where the truth behind Nate's disappearance begins to unravel. When I woke up that morning in the quiet Paris suite, the emptiness beside me felt louder than any noise. My phone lay silent on the nightstand. No messages. No calls. No explanation from Nate. Only the dull ache of betrayal pressed against my ribs like a weight I couldn't lift. Julian had sent up breakfast, warm brioche and coffee, but the sight of it made my stomach twist. My heart wanted to believe that Nate hadn't truly meant to leave me, that maybe he was coming back. But the truth, as cruel as it was, whispered otherwise. I looked out over the cobblestone streets, the city sparkling beneath the early light. Paris looked the same, but I had changed. In one night, I had aged 10 years. My grandson, the boy I'd raised after my son's death, had stranded me thousands of miles from home. When the phone finally buzzed, I leapt toward it with shaking hands. It wasn't Nate. It was Clara Devereux, the caregiver, the woman he'd chosen over me. I hesitated, then answered. Eleanor. Her voice came softly hesitant. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but... You're right about that, I said coldly. Where is he, Clara? Where is my grandson? There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. He's safe. He just needed space. Space. I repeated, my anger rising. Space from what, exactly? From his grandmother, who fed him, clothed him, and paid for his education when his parents couldn't? or from his own conscience. Please, Eleanor, Clara said quietly. It's not what you think. Then enlighten me. But before she could respond, the line crackled and went dead. I stared at the phone, trembling. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones. Later that day, Julian knocked on my door. His brow was furrowed with worry. Madam Whitmore, are you certain you don't want us to contact your embassy? I shook my head. No, not yet. I'll handle this myself. Julian exchanged a glance with his wife, Lucille, who joined him carrying a small bouquet of lilies. For peace, she said softly, placing them on my table. My mother always said lilies help the heart heal. Thank you, I whispered. You and Julian have been more family to me than my own. Julian pulled up a chair. You told me your grandson was traveling for business, yes? Perhaps something went wrong with his plans. No, I said bitterly. If something had gone wrong, he would have called. He's not lost, Julian, he's hiding. That night, I searched through my bag for clues, receipts, notes, anything he might have left behind. And that's when I found it. A folded piece of paper tucked inside the inner pocket of his jacket, which I'd mistakenly taken with me when we checked in. It was a letter of intent, signed by Nathaniel Whitmore and Clara Devereux, dated 2 weeks before our trip. The header read, Whitmore Holdings, Transfer Agreement. My blood ran cold. It was legal documentation transferring funds from my late husband's trust, my trust, to Clara's private foundation. He was taking my inheritance. No, our family's inheritance. I sat frozen for minutes, the air heavy and still. My hands trembled as I traced his name on the page. This wasn't the boy who used to help me in the garden, who called every Sunday just to hear me tell old stories. This was someone else, someone cold or desperate. I barely noticed the knock at the door. It was Julian again, holding a phone. Madam, a call for you. From England. It was Amelia. Mother, she said breathlessly. I just heard from Nate. He told me you're staying in Paris with a man named Moreau. I blinked. He told you that? He's the one who left me. She paused. He said you were confused, that you wandered off during the trip, that Mr. Moreau and his wife were helping you recover. My mouth went dry. He told you that? Yes. And he said not to worry. I sank into the chair. Lies. All lies. Amelia, I said softly, listen to me. He's lying to you. He took my financial documents. He's working with that woman, Clara. They've been planning something. There was silence on the line. Then Amelia's voice cracked. Mother, I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe what you've always known, I whispered. That I raised him with love. I would never make up something so cruel. But before I could say more, she hung up. Julian's voice broke the silence. We can go to the authorities, Madam Whitmore. If what you say is true, this is not just family business, it's fraud. I nodded faintly. Yes. Call Inspector Giroux. I remember you mentioning him once, your cousin, the investigator. Julian wasted no time. Within an hour, Inspector Giroux was in my suite, a tall man with a calm but commanding presence. He listened as I told him everything from the trip, to Nate's disappearance, to the document I'd found. He took notes carefully. You say your grandson has been handling your finances for years? Yes. After my husband died, I trusted him with everything. Giroux frowned. And this Clara Devereux, what do you know of her? She was my husband's caregiver before he passed. I thought she was kind, gentle. I even attended her wedding years ago. I had no idea she and Nate were in contact. He nodded thoughtfully. It appears they've been corresponding for some time. I'll make inquiries. As he left, I saw Lucille standing in the doorway, her face pale. Madam Whitmore, she said softly, I overheard. I'm so sorry. I smiled weakly. Don't be. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. That evening, as the Eiffel Tower glittered beyond my window, I replayed everything in my mind. Nate's sudden generosity to take me to Paris. His insistence on handling the hotel bookings. His growing irritation when I asked about my bank statements. It all fit together now. He hadn't brought me here out of love. He'd brought me here to get rid of me, long enough to access my accounts back home. My stomach turned. I had raised him to be kind, to be decent. How had greed hollowed him out so completely? Later that night, a soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. It was Madame Lefebvre, the elderly woman who lived across the hall. She leaned on her cane, her sharp eyes studying me. "I heard shouting earlier," she said. "Are you in trouble, Cher?" I hesitated. "Perhaps. But I have good people helping me." She smiled faintly. "Paris can be cruel, but it rewards courage. Don't let that boy take more from you than he already has." Her words stayed with me. Hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a photograph. Nate, sitting in a Paris cafe. Across from him, Clara. And on the table between them, a stack of papers. Beneath the image, a single text. "If you want the truth, come to Le Jardin at midnight. Come alone." My breath caught.
Who sent it? And why to me?
I looked out at the glowing city, my heart pounding like a drum. For the first time in days, I felt something stronger than pain. Resolve. I whispered to the night. "All right, Nate. Let's see what kind of man you've really become." The streets of Paris were empty that night, the city lights reflecting off slick cobblestones from a recent rain. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders, my heart pounding, and walked toward Le Jardin, the cafe where the mysterious message had told me to go. Every step felt like I was sinking deeper into uncertainty, but I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far to be left with more questions than answers. As I pushed open the door, the warm scent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries met me. The quiet hum of the few remaining patrons barely registered in my mind. And then I saw them, Nate and Clara, sitting at a corner table. Their heads bent close together, papers spread across the table. My blood froze. Nate looked up, his eyes widening in shock. "Grandma," he stammered. We didn't expect you to." I cut him off, my voice trembling but sharp. "I received your invitation, Nathaniel. Let's skip the pleasantries. What is all this?" Clara reached out, placing a hand over his. "Eleanor, it's not what it looks like. Please, just listen." I laughed bitterly. "Not what it looks like." "Oh, Clara, I saw the documents. The trust transfers. The letters. You've been plotting behind my back for weeks." Nate's face paled. "It wasn't like that, I swear. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" I repeated incredulously. "By taking my money and leaving me stranded in Paris?" Julian and Lucille had insisted on following me to the cafe, their presence a quiet reassurance in the tense space. Julian's eyes met mine, silently urging caution. Lucille's grip on his arm tightened, sensing the storm that was about to erupt. Clara's voice broke, soft and urgent. "Eleanor, he didn't know how to confront his own debts, how to fix the mistakes he's made." I tried to guide him, but he kept pushing me away. "Pushing you away?" I whispered, horrified. "This isn't guidance. This is betrayal. You've both taken advantage of my trust, of my love." Nate's hands shook as he rose to stand. "Grandma, listen, I made errors, terrible mistakes, but everything I did, I thought it was for the family. I didn't want you to suffer." I shook my head. "You call stealing from me for the family? I raised you. I gave you everything." A sudden quiet fell over the cafe as patrons glanced toward the commotion. Madame Lefebvre appeared behind me, leaning lightly on her cane. "Eleanor," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Sometimes the truth is heavier than we can carry. But you must face it, or it will crush you." I glanced at her, then back at Nate. "Face it? Fine. Let's face it." I stepped closer to the table, my eyes locked on him. "Why, Nathaniel? Why risk everything for a lie?" His shoulders slumped. Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd never forgive me for the mistakes I made. Afraid, Clara, and I would be alone in this mess. I didn't know how else to fix it. "You could have come to me," I said, my voice cracking. "I would have helped you. But instead, you left me stranded, humiliated, and alone in a foreign city." Clara's eyes filled with tears. He was desperate, Eleanor. I tried to stop him, but the door to the cafe swung open abruptly, and Inspector Giroux stepped inside. His presence cut through the tension like a blade. I received the reports, he said gravely, and I've been reviewing the transactions. Nate's face drained of color. Inspector? I have evidence, Giroux continued. Evidence that the trust documents were tampered with, that the signatures were coerced or falsified in part. Clara gasped, covering her mouth. Eleanor, I didn't know. I turned to her sharply. You didn't know? You were right there. You were complicit. Julian stepped forward. Perhaps there's more to uncover before we accuse anyone fully. Let's not jump to conclusions. I could barely hear him. My mind replayed the photograph that had led me here, the papers on the cafe table, Nate and Clara whispering. And then it hit me, the twist I hadn't seen coming. Clara had been manipulating the situation all along. Not Nate. Not fully. She had positioned herself as the guiding force, convincing him to make decisions he barely understood. She had used his fear and guilt against him, steering him toward actions that benefited her, not the family. You, Clara, I shouted, advancing toward her. It was you. All of it. You tricked him, manipulated him, and left me to find the truth alone. She froze, a flicker of panic in her eyes. Eleanor, please. Please what? I demanded, my voice rising. Please let me sit stranded while you plot behind my back. Please let him betray me, because you couldn't wait to take control. Nate lowered his head, ashamed. Grandma, I didn't see it. I was blind. She made me think it was the only way. The cafe felt unbearably small, the air thick with tension. I could feel the weight of every decision I'd made, every misstep, every moment I'd trusted Nate completely. And now, that trust was fractured beyond repair. Inspector Giroux took a careful step forward. Madam Whitmore, you're not alone. The investigation will reveal all. But now, it's clear that manipulation and deception have occurred on multiple levels. I nodded slowly, my hands trembling. Yes, I see it now. The truth is more tangled than I imagined. But it doesn't change the pain. Clara's lips trembled as she whispered, Eleanor, I never wanted to hurt you. I truly didn't. I trusted you. I screamed, my voice echoing against the walls. And now, look where we are. Outside, the streets were empty, silent witnesses to the unfolding tragedy. And then, in the middle of the chaos, Nate's voice broke, almost pleading. Grandma, can you forgive me? I looked at him, the boy I had raised, the man I had loved like a second son. My heart wrenched with sorrow. But in that sorrow, a revelation struck me. He was not entirely lost. He had been misled, yes, but his conscience still existed. His guilt, his fear, and his desperate attempts at redemption were proof. I turned to Inspector Giroux. We need to secure the documents. Every detail. Every transaction. I want the truth exposed, not just for me, but for him too. Giroux nodded. It will be done. And then, the most shocking twist of all came. My phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a video. Nate, at the same cafe, signing papers, but the camera panned and the signature wasn't his. It was Clara's. She had forged it. Every last document. I felt my knees buckle. Everything I had feared was true. The betrayal was complete. But more than that, the danger was far from over. I looked at Nate, his eyes filled with tears. It wasn't you alone, I said quietly. It was her. But you need to make this right. Before it's too late. He nodded, determination slowly returning to his face. I will, Grandma. I promise. I stood there, in the dimly lit cafe, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on me. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened something stronger within me. I whispered to the shadows, to the empty streets outside, to the cold Paris air. We're not finished yet. This story is far from over. And she, Clara, will answer for what she's done. The next morning, the air in Paris was crisp, the city waking slowly beneath a gray sky. I felt no warmth in the dawn, only the steely resolve that had been building inside me since the revelation in the cafe. Clara's deceit was exposed, Nate's innocence partially restored, but the shadow of betrayal still clung to every corner of our lives. I met Julian and Lucille outside the small hotel where I had spent the night. Julian's face was tight with worry. "Eleanor, are you sure about confronting her today?" he asked. I nodded.
Yes.
The lies can't stand any longer. If we wait, they'll grow stronger. I need her to face what she's done, and Nate needs to reclaim his life before more damage is done. Lucille placed a hand gently on my arm. "We'll be with you. Every step." I took a deep breath, thinking of the hours of heartbreak, the nights of fear, and the lonely moments when I had questioned everything. But that fear had transformed into determination. I was no longer the stranded grandmother in Paris. I was Eleanor Whitmore, and today I would demand justice. We arrived at Clara's apartment, an elegant, modern space that belied the darkness that had been festering within. I could hear movement inside as soon as Julian rang the bell. A moment later, Clara opened the door. She froze when she saw us. "Eleanor." Her voice trembled. I stepped forward, my gaze unwavering. "No excuses, Clara." "Not today. Not ever again." Nate appeared behind me, standing taller than I had seen him in weeks. There was guilt in his eyes, yes, but also a newfound courage. He had witnessed the truth, and now he was ready to face it. Clara closed the door slowly, attempting to maintain composure. "Eleanor, please, I can explain." I laughed bitterly, a sharp, cutting sound. "Explain? You forged documents, manipulated my grandson, and nearly destroyed our family. What more is there to explain?" She flinched but recovered quickly, her voice hardening. "I did what I had to. You weren't here to help him. He was weak, scared, and I guided him." "You guided him into deception," I shouted. "Do you understand what that means? Do you even comprehend the betrayal?" Nate stepped forward, his hand brushing against mine. "Clara, I trusted you. I thought you were helping. But you weren't helping me. You were helping yourself." Clara's eyes darted to him, fear and anger mingling in a dangerous cocktail. "You think you know everything, Nathaniel? You're naive. I was the only one who kept you from failing completely." I felt my hands tremble, my heart pounding like a drum of war. "Enough," I barked. "You will no longer manipulate anyone. You will answer for every false signature, every deceitful word, every act of betrayal." Julian and Lucille flanked me, their presence lending quiet strength. Outside, the streets of Paris seemed to pause, as if holding their breath, waiting for the confrontation to reach its climax. Clara's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in her armor. "Eleanor, you don't understand. If I fall, I take him down with me. Everything we've built." "Everything you've built?" I interrupted. "You mean the lies." "I am done being silent, Clara. I am done being a pawn in your schemes." Madame Lefebvre had arrived quietly, her presence a calm force. "Eleanor, remember, the truth is your shield. Stand firm. Let your voice cut through the deceit, but do not lose yourself in anger. Justice requires clarity, not rage." I inhaled deeply, feeling her wisdom settle over me like a cloak. She was right. This was not about vengeance, it was about righting a wrong. Inspector Giroux appeared next, his trench coat brushing the doorway. "Madam Whitmore," he said gently, "we've secured the evidence. Every forged document, every misleading signature, it's all in our custody. Clara, you will answer for this." Clara's face went pale. "You can't, this isn't fair." Giroux's gaze was unyielding. "The law is impartial, Madame Devereux, and impartiality is what will restore balance to those you've harmed." I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. "Clara, look at Nate. Look at the devastation you have caused. Not just to documents or money, but to trust, to love, to family. Do you see the consequences of your actions?" Nate's shoulders slumped as he whispered, I can't undo what's been done." "No, I replied softly. But you can reclaim your life. And I can help you. But first, she must face the truth. She must see what happens when manipulation goes unchecked. Clara's eyes darted between Nate, myself, and Inspector Giroux. The walls she had built around herself crumbled slowly, revealing a vulnerability she had hidden from everyone. I didn't mean. You didn't mean? I echoed, my tone sharp. Intent doesn't erase harm. Deeds define us, Clara. And today, your deeds are being weighed. A heavy silence filled the apartment. Even the air seemed tense, holding the weight of the confrontation. For the first time, Clara's confidence faltered. She was no longer in control, and that realization terrified her. Nate finally spoke, his voice steady, tinged with regret but also determination. Clara, you've made choices for me that were never yours to make. I trusted you, but trust must be earned, not manipulated. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to look at us directly. I thought I was protecting us. Protecting? I said, my voice gentle but firm. You were protecting yourself. And now you will face the consequences. The calm before the storm settled over the room. Clara sank into a chair, her body trembling, while Inspector Giroux quietly took out the case files, ready to document every detail. I looked at Nate, feeling both pride and sorrow. He had endured manipulation, betrayal, and confusion, but he still stood tall. You are stronger than you know, Nathaniel. Let this be the moment you reclaim your life and your choices. Julian and Lucille exchanged relieved glances. Amelia Hart, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. Eleanor, you've guided him, and you've revealed the truth. This is the turning point. What comes next is justice, but the balance has shifted in your favor. I nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Today, I had confronted the lies. I had demanded accountability. And yet, I knew the story was not finished. There was one more step, one final resolution that would restore not just my peace, but the integrity of the family I had fought so hard to protect. The apartment was silent now, save for Clara's quiet sobs. Outside, Paris continued its rhythm, indifferent yet somehow complicit in the unfolding drama. I felt a sense of calm, a fragile peace, knowing that the storm had been faced, but also that the final chapter had yet to be written. I turned to Inspector Giroux. Make sure nothing is overlooked. Every detail, every deception, it must all be documented. This is not just for me or Nate, but for the truth itself. Giroux nodded. It will be done, Madam Whitmore. The truth will not be hidden. And as I looked around the room at the faces of those I trusted, those who had stood by me, and even at the one who had betrayed, I realized the final battle was near. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that the truth would prevail. Hope that justice, quiet yet inevitable, would be served. And hope that when the dust settled, the family could begin to heal, though the scars of betrayal would remain as a reminder of the lessons we had learned. The morning sun spilled through the Parisian windows, painting the apartment in gentle shades of gold. For the first time in what felt like months, I could breathe without the weight of deceit pressing down on my chest. The confrontation with Clara had stripped away the layers of lies, and yet, the final moments of resolution had yet to unfold. Julian and Lucille were quietly arranging the evidence for Inspector Giroux. He moved with meticulous precision, noting every forged signature, every manipulated document, every small act of duplicity. Clara sat in the corner, the hard edges of her demeanor softened by the inevitable acknowledgement of consequence. She no longer fought against reality. She simply absorbed it, as one might accept the chill of a long-awaited winter. Nate was beside me, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and cautious optimism etched across his face. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the solidity of his presence. Nathaniel, I whispered, today marks not just the end of deception, but the beginning of reclaiming your life. You have the right to choose your path, free of manipulation. He nodded, his gaze lingering on Clara. I never wanted it to end like this. I trusted her. I know, I said softly. Trust is sacred, Nate, and the violation cuts deeply. But the fact that you can recognize it now, that you can reclaim your choices, that is strength, not weakness. Clara finally spoke, her voice small and trembling. I never meant to hurt anyone. I only wanted to secure everything. I thought I was helping, but I see now. I was only harming. I studied her for a long moment, my heart torn between compassion and the sting of betrayal. Clara, the harm was done. The truth is irreversible. But acknowledging it, that is the first step toward redemption. Madame Lefebvre, who had been quietly observing, spoke with her usual measured grace. Eleanor, sometimes those who betray are themselves trapped by their fears. Let this moment teach, not only to punish but to illuminate. The lesson extends beyond judgment. It is the birth of understanding. I nodded, taking in the weight of her words. They reminded me that justice was not merely about consequences. It was also about the restoration of balance, the recognition of truth, and the possibility of growth even amid sorrow. Inspector Giroux, having finalized the documentation, approached us. All necessary steps have been taken. Clara will face the legal consequences of her actions, but the truth has been fully restored. Your family's name, Madame Whitmore, is cleared. And more importantly, Nate's future is no longer dictated by deception. Nate exhaled deeply, a tension leaving his shoulders that had lingered far too long. Thank you, all of you, for standing with me, for guiding me. Julian placed a reassuring hand on his back. The storm is past. Now it's time to rebuild. Lucille smiled softly. And to remember that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet persistence to see what is right, even when others falter. I looked around at the room. The faces of those who had stood beside me, the one who had wronged, and the remnants of a life that had nearly unraveled. I realized, in that moment, that love and truth, though battered, were still resilient. Families endure, hearts heal, and even in betrayal, there is a chance for reflection and growth. Clara's eyes met mine once more, tears glistening. Eleanor, will you forgive me? Forgiveness. The word hovered like a fragile bird in the morning light. I took a moment to breathe, to let the memories of heartbreak and anger surface, and then recede. Clara, I said finally, forgiveness does not erase what was done, but it allows us to move forward. Learn from this. Let it shape you, not define you. That is all I can give. She nodded, the first glimmer of genuine understanding crossing her features. Nate turned to me, a tentative smile breaking through the lingering shadows of hurt. Grandmother, I can't thank you enough. I don't know what I would have done without you. I squeezed his hand gently, feeling the weight of years and love intertwine. Nathaniel, life is full of tests, some crueler than others. But we endure, not because life is fair, but because we are strong enough to face its storms. You have the strength to create your own path now, and that is more precious than any inheritance or fortune. Amelia Hart, who had remained quietly supportive throughout, stepped closer. Eleanor, your courage has saved more than a family. It has restored faith, given clarity, and reminded us all that wisdom, patience, and resilience are the truest forms of power. I smiled faintly, feeling the warm pulse of affirmation. Every tear shed, every sleepless night, every pang of worry had led to this moment. Not just justice, but a profound peace, an understanding that even when those we trust falter, our integrity and courage remain unshakable. Julian placed a reassuring arm around my shoulders. The journey may leave scars, Eleanor, but it also leaves lessons. And those who have survived are stronger for them. Lucille added, and love, true love, survives. Family survives. Even when tested, even when torn, the bonds we nurture can be rebuilt. I looked out the window at Paris, the city stretching in timeless elegance, indifferent yet alive, as if it had witnessed the entire human drama unfold countless times before. I realized then that life's storms, though relentless, are tempered by the bonds of trust, courage, and truth.
Nate squeezed my hand again.
I promise to honor what you've taught me, grandmother. To build trust, to act with integrity, and to never let deceit take root in my life again. I felt a swell of pride mixed with a quiet sorrow. Nathaniel, that is all any of us can hope to leave behind. A path lit by honesty and love, even after the shadows of betrayal have passed. Clara, sitting quietly, whispered to no one in particular, I will try to do better. I offered her a nod, a gesture of acceptance, not of absolution, but of acknowledgement that the first steps toward change were hers to take. Inspector Giroux, his duty completed, prepared to leave. Madam Whitmore, your family is safe now, legally and morally.
The truth stands.
And that is the most enduring form of justice. I watched him go, the echoes of his footsteps fading into the corridors of the building, leaving behind clarity and the gentle hum of resolution. In the calm that followed, I gathered Nate close, feeling the warmth of connection, and allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. Life had dealt harsh blows, but it had also shown the resilience of the human spirit. Pain, betrayal, fear, these were the crucibles that forged wisdom, strength, and an unbreakable bond between those who truly loved one another. I looked at my grandson, at Julian and Lucille, at Amelia, and even at Clara, whose journey of reckoning had just begun. And I realized that the storm had passed, not because it was easy, but because we had faced it with courage, honesty, and unwavering determination. And as I stood in the Paris morning, the golden light brushing my face, I whispered quietly, almost to myself. Even when the world turns its back, even when those we love falter, truth, love, and resilience will find us. And in the end, they will always light the way home. The chapter was closed. The wounds would heal. And the bonds, tested by fire, had endured.